Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to welcome our luncheon speaker, Jonathan Wetzel, Director, McKinsey Global Institute. Jonathan works with Chinese businesses to develop strategies for global growth and with city, regional, and national authorities on energy, sustainability, and economic development. He has been based in China for more than 15 years and has written 3 books on China. Please welcome Jonathan Wetzel.
Good afternoon. A pleasure to be with you. I've enjoyed this morning greatly, and I'm applause really for all of you guys because you're creating something that is truly distinctive here, and it's exciting to be part of it. I'm going to be talking to you about what's happening more broadly from my perspective sitting in China and from looking at trends around the world. I think that this will be an outside-in view, but I think it has some takeaways for us as leaders of businesses and for us individually as well. So, to get us into this, I wanted to start by going back to that technology issue we had earlier about how to, what's going on and what are some of the uncertainties, and ask you guys a couple of questions. And here's the first one. How many people do you think will move to cities in China between now and 2025? I'll give you 3 options. Is that 90, 140, 190 million? Vote now. How many people are we going to have moving from farm to city in China? And we're getting the technology going here. This is sort of like to get everybody focused and sort of into the game here. So we got some optimists. We got some people in the middle. Let's see. Oh, it's going down. It's going up. Oh, we have votes for, and let's see. We got to get up to 20 something at least. So, yeah. I get the feeling there's something of a consensus here building. Okay, all right. Somebody's been to China. Let's go with that. Yeah, that's right. There are over 190 million people going to move to China from the farm to the city. Over 2/3 of the total U.S. population is moving from an agricultural to an urban lifestyle over the next 10 years. Now, that's a pretty big number. Let me give you one other question. How much foreign direct investment flowed into the United States in 2013? So, again, 3 choices here. 135 billion, 235 billion, 335 billion. What do you think? How much money, foreign investment, came into the United States in 2013? Any guesses? Let's see. Oh, okay. What are we doing here? A little bit more of a distribution on this one. 335, 4 or 5. Let's just go for a little bit longer. And okay. Now we kind of mixed it up on you this time a little bit, but let's see. Okay, so we have votes here around a little bit trending towards the 335 billion. In reality, what we got was 235 billion. Is the right number, about 60% of Michigan's GDP. That was a one-year number, 60% of Michigan's GDP coming in the form of foreign direct investment. Still a pretty darn big number. And if we look at how much of that wound up in Michigan, I think all I say is that not enough. You guys should have more. So the point of these is saying these are really big numbers, and these are numbers that you would not have seen a decade ago. You would not be able to imagine $250 billion coming into the United States, even the U.S., in 1 year. And so this is what we're going to talk about, is the pace and the change and the accelerating tempo of growth and how that affects all of us. So I'm going to lay out here 4 forces that basically drive what we see driving the economy. These are long-term forces. They've been going on for 20 or 30 years, and we think they're still going to go on, and they're going to accelerate, and they're going to accumulate. What that means for Michigan, and what that means for you as leaders of business and society. So what are those forces? First off, urbanization. Secondly, technologies. Thirdly, aging. And fourthly, interconnect. So those are the 4 things that we see. If you put them together, and you add them on top of each other, they add up to some huge disruptions in how we think about business, how we think about our daily lives, how we think about our society. First off, urbanization. Okay, this is my city. This is where I live, Shanghai. And on this page, you see the old Shanghai on the bottom and the new Shanghai on the top. And if you took this picture, 20 years ago, you would not have seen anything on the top. And in fact, if you went to the Epcot Center, I really hope they've updated the video because it used to show farms and fishing villages where there's instead skyscrapers. So this is obviously a huge and rapidly changing picture. If we step back and look at the whole country, that means like 50 of the top 200 cities in the world will be in China. Now that is an astonishing change. And as you look at the map, what you can see is that there are, in fact, some patterns to this, and there are clusters. China has essentially got this huge coastal development around 3 big clusters, and each of these clusters is the size of a fair-sized European country. So there's a bit of a parlor game saying, okay, well, Greater Shanghai is kind of France, and Beijing is kind of Germany, and Poland is kind of Shenyang. But it's fair to say this is not a country, it's a continent. And each of the regional clusters is the size of a fair-sized country. Now that is obviously a huge shift, and it's hundreds of millions of people. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because it creates wealth, it creates economies, it creates new societies. This is a chart showing the economy and how it develops versus the urbanization. And it's a very simple message. Essentially, there is no rich country which isn't urbanized. If you want to get rich, you have to urbanize. And China's right in the middle of that. And that is a long-term trend. And as countries urbanize, they get richer. This has some huge implications we'll talk about for markets, also for competition. And that's where we are right now. We're only halfway through this story. And that's when we talk about having another 200 million people come into the Chinese cities. That's another 200 million consumers. It's also another potential 200 million competitors. So urbanization is kind of the first big trend. Here's the next one, technologies. And we're going to populate this page with a whole bunch of them. And it looks like an alphabet soup of almost everything. And so you look at this and say, is this more than it used to be? What's different about technology? And yes, in fact, it is. What the first thing is different about technology that we see now is the pace. And so it almost took, a good 115 years to go from the first phone call to getting the first website, and then it took another 15 years to get to the next iPhone. I think the one that's really cool is 3D printing. It took 500 years to go from a printing press to a computer printer, and it's taken 30 years to get to a 3D printer. So we're just compressing the pace of change. And so I'm not here to say that singularity is about to happen or anything, but we do see, we're past Moore's Law if you want to look at gene sequencing. We're way past Moore's Law in terms of this pace and the rate of technological discontinuities. And it's not only the pace, it's just how fast things get adopted, and so how quickly it takes, how quickly you can get to scale. So it took 38 years for 50 million people to start listening to the radio. Apparently it took 13 years for them to start watching TV. It took them 1 year to start using Facebook. That's a US number. These are sort of US examples. We're talking about China. Okay, those numbers are even shorter. I mean, to get Xiaomi to 50 million users probably took about 2 months. So the ability to scale, the pace, the fact that you can push these technologies into the marketplace that much faster, in turn, creates a productivity revolution. And we've done a little bit of work thinking about that, and we'd sort of bucket them into these 4 areas. For reasons of time, I won't go into that in detail, but let's just say, there are 4 big disruptive technology groups. There's the IT, how we use it. There's the machines, how they work for us. There's energy, how we develop it and also how we use it. And finally, there's the building blocks, which are a bit more the future, and the nano and the gene sequencing. These things will change our worlds, and we're just starting to see the impacts of them. So that's the second one, technology. Third one, the Chinese picture. It's the 4-2-1 problem. You say, 4 grandparents, 2 parents, 1 working person. This is the reality of the next generation. It's not something we hear a lot about, but for the last 50 years, about half of economic growth was driven by population, by the demographic dividend, the fact we had a huge number of people of working age coming into the labor force. We're all done with that. Basically, that the working age population is set to increase marginally or decline in most countries around the world. And this is going to change the way we think about labor, the way we think about skills, the way we think about the working age of most of us. And it's going to be actually, of course, more of it going to happen here, but let's not, in China, I see exactly the same thing. Here's a chart showing the share of the total population that's over 60. By the year, when you get out to the 2025, 2030, it's over 30, 40% of the so-called developed economies that already have over 25% of their population over 60. So, I mean, this is a fundamental shift in society and how we think about people who are of a certain age. Another way of showing this is that China, and about 1 in 4 people in advanced economies in China will be 65 years or older by the year 2040. So in China, in Shanghai, we've got this pavilion, the Expo Pavilion. It sort of looks like a ziggurat upside down. Also looks like the Chinese demographic pyramid in the year 2040. So that's this is a shift because it implies obviously that first of all we'll have to think more carefully about productivity and how we create that. We'll also have to redefine what it means to work. How much what actually does a job look like. So that's the third theme. Fourth one, finally, interconnect, greater global connections. And this, again, has been going on for almost as long as we've had trade, is that we see a secular trend towards the increase in trade, an increase in connections. But it's not just trade that's getting connected. It's information, it's capital, and it's people. So all of those things are increasing. And there's a big reason for that is that by participating in flows and exchange, we increase our productivity. Cities and companies that are part of those flows, that are the hubs, they grow faster. They make more money. They're more productive. In fact, we'd say that cities that are better connected can grow on average 20-25% faster than those that are out of the flow. So get in the flow. How big is this flow? Well, this chart's a little hard to read, but just sort of look at the size of the width. Back in the years 1990, interregional trade, the trade that was going from 1 or 2 places to the rest of the world, and it was really 1 or 2 flows, about $2 trillion US. The year 2013, first of all, the flows are everywhere, and secondly, it's about $11 trillion. So 2 to 11 over the course of 13 years. I mean, multiply by 5. It's a pretty big expansion. And this is all about comparative advantage. People finding where is it better, where is it cheaper, where is there more opportunities to source something and go and get it. So, these are fundamental shifts. We'd argue that this calls for us to rethink how we make decisions, because a lot of us grew up in what we'll call the Great Moderation, or the period of time of 1970s, 80s, 90s, where things were relatively stable, and we're saying fundamentally the rules of the game are shifting because of these trends. These trends are adding up to a new game. What do we mean by that? Well, here's one, consumption. We used to think that when you launched a market, launched a product, where would you launch it? Where would the consumer, the test market be? Well, it would be an OECD, advanced economy market. And in fact, no. We said what we start to see is that the consumption has basically shifted to emerging markets. And that as this would show, over 4 trillion 4 billion of the world population, this is the new emerging market consumer. They're going to be the market of the future. And it's a different market. Anybody want to take a guess of how many people are going to be studying the piano in China right now? Is it, there's no consensus on this. 10 million? 100, somebody was listening yesterday. Okay. Yeah, it's about 100 million people are studying the piano. And I think that it's safe to say that Yamaha and Steinway are not making those pianos. Who's making the pianos for 100 million Chinese kids? It's the Pearl River Delta Piano Company or something like that. Some local guy's making a piano, and that's the product, and that's a product that's getting scale. And eventually, the guy who's making the product for those 100 million Chinese kids playing the piano, that's going to be a global company because it's got global scale. So this is the new reality. Is that the consumption, the marketplace, the consumer, that's where they are. And there's going to be billions of them. So that's one change. Here's another one. I work a lot in energy and mining. The way we used to think about prices in energy and mining was that basically technology was going to improve everything, so each and every year prices would go down. And so we had 100 years of essentially declining prices because of technical productivity. And then something happened. We had this stochastic reset at the end of the 90s, and all of a sudden we've lost a century of technical productivity. Now, we're not going to say it's going to stay there, but what we can certainly say there's more volatility. And this is a reality of thinking about energy development, infrastructure development. We can't count on the same kind of technical forces that drove that whole industry for decades. And that's a new environment. Here's another one. With the market comes the competition. So here's a forecast for the Fortune 500 over 50% of the Fortune 500 will be from emerging market regions in the year 2025. 50%, of which a good 50%, so 25 of the total, is from China. So it's this, again, the Pearl River Delta Piano Company goes global. This is a reality that gets a lot of my Chinese colleagues, my local colleagues, when I work with them, very excited because they say, hey, there's a company for me. I can become a global Fortune 500 company and I don't have to leave China. So this is, this is in a sense good news for them. It's a reality of a shifting competitive marketplace. And I cannot think of an industry where emerging markets are a major share of the total that will not have a global emerging market competitor. It's worth saying that twice. Every major global industry will have a global emerging market competitor in it. It's just part of the picture. And so thinking about that, assuming that, it needs to be part of one's competitive mindset. A couple more quickly. Here's one on in terms of capital. Again, this was the great moderation. For decades, our capital, our share of investment as a share of GDP, relatively low. We basically spent a lot of money investing after World War II to reindustrialize North America, well, to urbanize North America and to reindustrialize Europe and rebuild Japan, and then didn't have that. So things went away, and so we actually had relatively low share of investment as GDP right up until just a few years ago, and now it's kind of heading back. And so what we see is that demand for urbanization, the capital that has to go into urbanization, that's going to result in less capital for everybody else. Basically, China and India have enough money saved to urbanize China and India. They don't have enough money to rebuild North American infrastructure. And so this is a reality of the world that we're going to have to start thinking about doing more with less on the field of capital. And so how do we make better projects and make those projects pay for themselves? That's going to be another big change in our environment. And finally here, again, this one is a little bit around labor. So labor markets just aren't clearing the way they used to be. We used to think that jobs would always be there. We may have to change around a little bit, but we can see growth with jobs. What we see now is a big disconnect. We start to see surpluses of low-skilled laborers, and we start to see shortages of high-skilled laborers. And this is a reality that is omnipresent. It's not just a US problem. I will note it's also a China and developing markets problem as well. And so this kind of disconnect between what is the workplace of the future require and what is the educational system delivering, the skills that the workforce had, this is also another big ongoing challenge. So these are sort of five different ways in which we're seeing disruptions. What do they matter? How do they affect everything? So here is a statement. We are suffering just now from a bad attack of economic pessimism. It's common to hear people say the era of enormous economic progress which characterized the last century is over, and that the rapid improvement in the standard of living is now going to slow down. The decline in prosperity is more likely than an improvement in the decade which lies ahead of us. Anybody want to guess when that was said? When that was said? You can shout it out. So 19, okay, everybody's zooming around, and it's pretty close. You guys got it. I believe this is a wildly mistaken interpretation of what is happening to us. John Maynard Keynes, 1930. 1930. And what he went on to say is that I would predict that the standard of life in progressive countries 100 years hence will be between 4 and 8 times as high as it is today. Now, he said that in 1930, right? It was 1 year after the Great Depression started. This is a guy who obviously had no problem making a forecast. On the other hand, 100 years is a really long time. So, was he right? He was. On average, it's between 4 and 8 times. Keynes' bold prediction has proven to be correct. We're on the track for 8 times growth, which is amazing. I mean, so this is what we see as the implication for all that change. Change is not necessarily something to hide from. Change actually creates the engines for economic growth. And therefore, as you think forward, so that it is less about what we think is the current debate in terms of how do we stabilize and reduce the debt, and how do we enhance the productive capacity of the nation. How do we grow the underlying forces that allow us to get on that trajectory to 4 to 8 times growth? That's what we're going. We should not yes, the Depression, it happened, but that didn't stop us from increasing productive capacity. So what we, as McKinsey, started to step back and say, where might that come from? Where would be the productive capacity? What could we invest in to get on that trajectory to the 4 to 8 times growth? And that's where we think the opportunities are, and we call them game changers. Game changers in the sense that these are new, they're substantial, they hit productivity, GDP, job growth, they raise all of that above trend by 2020, so it's within a time frame, you can see it. There's a window of opportunity, and it has impact across multiple sectors. So that's what we're after here. We want game changers, things that can drive productive capacity of the nation to take advantage of those trends. And in fact, we find that there are such things. What we did was to step back and look at all those trends, and we compared them to the opportunities that we could identify that would be so big and move them, and we found 5. First of all, energy, clearly. I mean, there's a renaissance in energy. We see that linked in many ways to the demand for energy, globally the demand for energy from industrial urbanization and also trade of energy. We find infrastructure. Infrastructure maybe not as much an opportunity as a requirement. So simply put that as global trade flows increase, we need to be able to get into those flows. So the investment in infrastructure and the reinvestment in infrastructure becomes an enabling aspect of economic growth. Big data and technology is one of those big things that can happen relatively quickly. We put in place a lot of the infrastructure to do that. Now it's about making it work for us. How do we create the service energy, the service economy of the future using the information, the transparency that creates? Whether it's about finding a new home or about delivering a new service or about improving the quality of a product line, all these things can require big data and make a huge difference to the economy. Fourthly, talent and workforce development. Obviously a big issue for the long term. Even in the short term, the reality of an aging world means we need to rethink how our workforce is trained and how it's developed and how we use better the resources, the knowledge that we've actually got. Along with that, of course, is that education becomes a huge opportunity. There are more people coming to Australia now for education than for tourism. It's a staggering number. So this is kind of a thing that we should be thinking about what is that we can actually offer in the way of education to grow our economy. Finally, knowledge-intensive trade. The United States is the only advanced economy that runs a deficit in knowledge-intensive trade. That has to be reversed. A lot of it is around small and medium-sized enterprises and helping them figure out how to export, where to go, how to get into international marketplaces. This is an opportunity that we should not shy away from. It's a great upside for all of us. So those are five big opportunities that we saw. When we looked at what Business Leaders for Michigan has been doing, we saw that there's a reasonably good alignment around this, that there was, in fact, in the BLM 6-pillar growth strategy, a pretty close alignment between a lot of the opportunities we saw and many of the 6 pillars. And given that you guys wrote the plan, I'm not going to explain it back to you, but I do think it's relevant to say this is a good opportunity for growth, and there may still be upside. If we look at things like big data, there may be more opportunities to grow on that. But nonetheless, there is a plan in place, and now it's about sticking to it. I think it was said earlier today. This is not a one-year kind of fix. This is a 5-10-year kind of journey. And yes, if you stick with it and you continue to launch these initiatives, you'll be on the right track. So what does that mean ultimately for all of us? And I think this is where I'm going to close with two comments. First of all, it's all about us. A lot of the complaints about historically about things are not going wrong is sort of basically a Washington kind of problem. Well, you say yes. I mean, well, leaving all that on one side, the reality is of these game changers to realize that it's largely about private and state and local investment. Some of it's entirely about private, like energy or trade, for that matter. This is really about private investment. In things like big data, also infrastructure and talent. Okay, there's more of a government implication for that, but that's largely state and local government. And this is where this kind of a group has a huge opportunity to make a difference. And I applaud you for your initiative to do that and to stick together through trying times. And now you got the opportunity. You have the momentum. Keep driving. There's one thing here is that the future is really about your community and how you build it. It's not about anything else. You have the scale, you have the opportunity, you have the momentum. Keep doing it. And to do it, I said, this is the most important factors. Be open to this. Be open to resetting your intuition about what's possible. Embed curiosity. It's been mentioned a number of times here, but if you don't think about the opportunity, you're not going to get it. So you have to actually think about what is the opportunity and surround yourself with curious people. Prioritize agility over caution. Some people think that the way to seize an opportunity is kind of bulk up. Take the analogy from athletics. As the athletes who are nimble, who react faster, who prize agility, they're the ones who don't get hurt. They're the ones who are resilient. They're the ones who bounce back faster, and they're the ones who ultimately win. And I think the analogy applies in business as well. The ability to see around the corner, to react quickly, to respond, to avoid being lumbered by history, also by older ways of thinking, that's what leads to successful and more productive growth. And finally, find the opportunity, not the hazard. Too many people sort of look at the future and basically see all the threats. Winston Churchill, personal hero, said, I am an optimist. There does not seem to be much case for being anything else. So, this is the opportunity. Let's take it in both hands, grab it, and I'm pretty sure that you guys are on a great track and look forward to hopefully being part of it in the future. Thanks.
Please welcome our moderator, Laurel Champion, General Manager, Southeast Michigan MLive Media Group.
Great discussion. Thanks, Jonathan. Looking forward to a great discussion. Now, let's hope that technology is on our side today, because I get the iPad. And I want to remind everybody to please, these are questions from you all that are being fed to me here, so please follow the instructions and go ahead and text any questions that you have. So Jonathan, for a small or mid-sized business looking to break into Asian markets, what is the key advice that you would give to them?
Couple of important things. First of all, I don't think there's any such thing as Asia. Asia is a geographic expression, not an economic identity. So it's very important to get that granularity, so to be really focused on where you're going and who you're going to talk to when you're there. So that's, especially as a small and medium-sized business, don't have the resources to go everywhere. So picking a spot is probably the single most important thing. And then after that, you got to go. I mean, too many people think about the market from here and say, well, you're not actually there. You've got to actually go there. And you actually have to do it and be hands-on and be in the marketplace. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, great, thank you. What advice would you give to Michigan's governor to help accelerate our economy?
That's a really long conversation. No, I think the first thing is obviously to support business leaders for Michigan. I think that the agenda here is clear and it's been enabled. I think there's been a lot of concern about how quickly can things go. I think the pace is a lot about empowering local communities to take a lot of initiatives and to support those in doing so. So I would encourage the governor to think about, first of all, how he can raise the examples of success, and he should be out there sort of showing where things are working, so to help communities around the state to learn from best practices, if you will. And secondly, yeah, I mean, the state has to be a booster. The state has to be involved. This is a competitive world, and there are many aspects of the economy, of infrastructure spending, that need to be a public and private partnership. And so the role of the public in driving those investments, whether it's in education or physical infrastructure, is critical. That doesn't happen, we're not going to be able to do it by ourselves. Great.
So for the Chinese consumers, with all this growth, what are they spending their money on other than piano lessons?
The Chinese consumer is not dissimilar to most of us, in that there is an initial phase of a kid in a candy store, and so that yes, we want the stuff. So they're buying the car, they're buying the air conditioner and the washing machine, and they're buying all this other consumer stuff. They're also starting to buy services, and I think that the government is sort of wrestling with this question of how much is enough, and sort of how do we sort of influence, what's the China dream? That's the big thing. So the consumer is alive and well. It's a great consumer story. It's growing faster than GDP, income's growing faster, consumption's growing faster. But increasingly, there's concern about how does this become sustainable? So ultimately, how much is enough? But at this point, I think we're very early in that process. So there's a lot of upside there. Almost, it's a bit of a dartboard. Almost, at this point, if you can offer a premium product or a product that has the brand qualities that would differentiate it from a local product, there's a market for that.
Okay, great. What are the key characteristics of vital cities, and what can Michigan do to revitalize its urban areas?
Well, that's my personal passion, sort of cities and urban development. So I could easily continue for the rest of the half an hour, but I'll try to focus it on cities are productivity engines. That's what they do. They bring people together, and then through high density, high frequency interactions, they create specialization, and they create knowledge, and they allow us to share in all of that. So great cities share. Great cities are on a rising trajectory. Great cities include. And I think those are the things that I think about as characteristics of great cities. What's less important, though, is because those characteristics I find less important than what do you do to become a better city? And no city wants to copy any other city. Los Angeles doesn't want to be New York, or Paris doesn't want to be London. We want to be a better LA. We want to be a better Paris, whatever. So it's about that trajectory, and basically they do three things. They grow smart, they do more with less, and they win support. Those are the three things, and I encourage our city leadership to think about the growth. Not all growth is necessarily good. There's always some externalities. And so how do we grow smart? How do we do more with less? How do we use our resources better? And how do we make sure that this is a broader based movement? It's just not about me. It's winning support for change from the whole community.
Okay, great. Are there any specific examples of success that you can share in the U.S. market that we should model after, given your presentation?
Well, success, I guess, in terms of the economic development and the sort of companies, there are many great examples of success and U.S. companies going abroad, being successful in developing the marketplaces. I mean, I would frankly include, many of the leading automotive manufacturers from this great state of Michigan in those. I think there are some great success stories for automotive OEMs. Beyond that, small and medium-sized enterprises, I could tell stories, and my favorite one is about a West Virginia chemical company that went from being 3 guys in a lab to becoming a global partner for the China National Petroleum Corporation in cleaning up oil fields in Iraq and Canada and God knows where. So it's taking advantage of these trends is not something that is only for the big company, so that every size company can do it, and just sort of get your head around its technology, its urbanization, it's the skills of the people we've got, and it's global. That can lead on to success.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question. What do you anticipate Michigan's manufacturing base to look like in 2030?
Well, it's one of those kind of things. If I knew the answer to that question, I'd be a lot richer than I am, and I probably wouldn't be in the room. But the crystal ball kind of point would be, I think, to say that manufacturing. Well, first of all, there's going to be a strong manufacturing base. This is a place which has science and engineering as one of its cores and sort of the capability. So renewing that is a necessity, and so I would expect that it will be renewed. The technology engine that we talked about, I mean, as we said, the gene sequencing revolution is way beyond Moore's law right now. So I kind of suspect that whatever manufacturing base we have today, it won't be there in 15 or 20 years. That we'll be looking at a fundamentally different process in many parts of the economy. What I do expect is that it will be continue to be high value added, and will continue to be a source of knowledge and growth for the community. And I think that it will also continue to be even better integrated into the economy. It won't be sort of separated out. It will be, we'll see manufacturing and service combined together in an urban community.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much for your time and a fascinating presentation.
Great. Thank you very much.